third world banana republic, trains and planes and automobiles. We in Florida and we in Miami die at a disproportionate rate because we're supposed to be a beach town cycling community, and instead there are planes. We don't have the infrastructure for any of this. Me and Billy chronicle it every week. Today on Because Miami, we will be talking to someone who proves everything that Billy's been howling about in the Bitcoin industry, about what Mayor Suarez has been doing with what has been called around here shitcoin or mierda coin. Somebody did the reporting beyond what Billy has done, and we will talk to the author of that article that has a lot of facts about that Miami coin that will be offensive to people. And I also have been remiss in not getting to you before now on everything that's happening around abortion rights and Roe versus Wade. So we will do that later in the show as well. But first, I wanted to start with mass shootings. This should go without saying, not wanting to be have them normalized in any way at all. But you just had in Buffalo a racist terrorist act that isn't in any world okay, and Fox News and others are backing away from the idea that any of this was instigated. Fox News will back away saying never condone violence, and yet some of the language around what we can talk about in Florida, critical race theory, replacement theory, some of the language is inflammatory. It incites, and then every once in a while somebody bears arms and decides to go on a killing spree, a racist killing spree. So our hearts out to Buffalo, obviously, one of multiple mass shootings last weekend. But Billy, you tell me, you absorbed all of that. How, as we every week fight about something politically because we just we want teachers, for example, in Florida to be able to discuss some of this stuff honestly.
From the Killer's Manifesto, you can see that he is a self-avowed white supremacist, a racist, an anti-Semite. The reason why I call out particularly people in public life, elected officials, politicians, people who have a bully pulpit, have a spotlight, have a media presence. The reason I call them out for sometimes what may very well be, we'll call them minor examples or instances or utterances that are racist and anti-Semitic. The reason I call them out is, let's call it a broken windows theory of racism. If you do not call out these smaller episodes where people in the public sphere perpetuate racism and anti-Semitism and conspiracy theories, of which critical race theory is among them. It's born as an anti-Semitic race conspiracy theory that ties in Jews and Marxism and diversity, all things that people right of center, far right of center despise. Jews, communists, diversity, people of color, immigrants. It feeds all of that, those culture wars. If you don't call it out at that level, it metastasizes. And it, you know what it does? It grooms, Dan, if you'll allow me to borrow a term. It grooms. It grooms. Here's the thing, because I got a lot on this, but I'll say first and foremost, you know, there was this theory, and we'll talk about it later, about, you know, when Anita Bryant had her moment when she was saying, save our children, we need to fight against, this is in the 70s in Dade County after they passed an equal rights ordinance affording gays and lesbians the same rights as everybody else had, no discrimination in housing or in government or in policy. And she said, we need to save our children because God forbid we should have gay school teachers because they will recruit. That was the pre-grooming term, was recruit. They have to recruit because they cannot reproduce. They don't have to recruit. They don't have to reproduce because people are born that way. So there's always more LGBTQ plus people being born every day. So they don't have to recruit. You know who has to recruit? Republicans have to recruit. Because you're not born stupid and you're not born hateful. You are trained. You are groomed to be that. And that is who this is. This is Frankenstein's monster of Tucker Carlson, of the entire Fox News primetime lineup that has mainstreamed insane bullshit theories like critical race theory, like the Great Replacement theory, and has gotten people scared that America is not going to be a white country anymore, which is weird because it didn't really start that way either. Okay, there was a Great Replacement in this country. It was of Native Americans and indigenous people by white people.
This is what is obvious in what's happening.
Built by black people, by the way, this country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and now you come to Florida, and I couldn't help but wonder, a child going to school, going to a public school this week, and hearing about this news, seeing it on the news, hearing their parents perhaps talk about it, and going to their teacher and saying, what is this? What about this? What happened? Can you tell me about this? Can you tell me how to deal with this? Can you tell me how to understand this? Teach me. You are my teacher. Teach me what happened here, what happened in Buffalo. If you look at the laws in the state of Florida, newly passed, what can they say without being fired? Can they teach this honestly and accurately? Could they even read an article from a newspaper about this to their class without the threat of being fired because it would make white people feel uncomfortable, because it would be considered critical race theory, because it might promote the concept of diversity, the concept that there is a deep-seated hatred of people of color, of Jews, of immigrants, and an access to firearms at such a level that when people's minds are poisoned by this toxic rhetoric and this toxic bullshit, they're going to take up arms and go on a beautiful Sunday afternoon to a grocery store. In fact, travel 200 miles to a neighborhood that is predominantly African American, to a grocery store that is the only one of this regional chain in a predominantly black community, because they have faced generations of institutional racism and fighting back against trying to get something other than a dollar store and a liquor store in a community, trying to get fresh produce, trying to get a supermarket. And this animal, this racist, this white supremacist terrorist comes and mows down 10 people and nearly shoots a white person lying on the ground, stops himself and quickly says, sorry, like it's just a Sunday afternoon at the supermarket. And I'm worried that what they'll start teaching in public schools is not about the hateful rhetoric and racism that caused this mass murder and this tragedy, but they will teach the Great Replacement theory. They'll actually teach the hate that leads to this shit. And you will have a governor in the state of Florida that will call yet another special legislative session, which through a pandemic, through a looming recession, through an unemployment website that was crashing, through all of this death and suffering and financial turmoil, he has called legislative sessions to do what? To increase gambling in the state of Florida, to punish.
I'm okay with that one, actually.
To punish Disney, and I'm actually okay with that one too.
Me too.
I'm all for casinos in Florida, but priorities, Dan. Priorities. To punish Disney for their political free speech, and now he's going to call a special legislative session, get all of our lawmakers back to Tallahassee at great expense to the taxpayers outside of the regular legislative session to do what? What is the pressing issue? Constitutional carry. To let everyone in Florida carry a gun without any training, without any experience, without any certification, without any registration. I don't know really how that would change much from how it is today, but the point is it will make it legal.
Well, it's going to make it all more dangerous. Everything's going to be made more dangerous instead of less dangerous.
Magatov.
That's where we are, and it must be particularly offensive to you as someone who cares about Miami to see the fear of others be something that continues to separate us in every way, even from the rest of Florida, because we've been talking about this. There's nothing about this region that is like the rest of the state.
It is probably one of the most diverse counties. I mean, it's a minority-majority community, which is extremely rare, especially in a county of this size with this kind of prosperity for some. We have self-segregated into our own communities and neighborhoods and subdivisions. That is not entirely accidental. We'll talk about that next week.
I mean, no, there's racism all over Miami, deep-seated racism.
There's segregation. There's modern-day Jim Crow
But
laws.
all you're talking about with these books and everything else is just an advancement or an evolution of the whitewashing of history texts that has gone on throughout history, that has made that has made colonization an act of heroes.
And if you don't teach that history, if you don't teach tolerance, you are teaching hate, because what your silence is violence. Your silence is saying that this is not important. These are not issues that children need to learn about or discuss. But it's worse than silence, because again, turn on the TV in prime time. These are not fringe theories by extremists in the dark corners of the internet.
Not anymore.
This is mainstream.
Not anymore.
Republican
It used to be.
ideology. It used to be, but they have been empowered, and they've come out of those dark corners and those chat rooms and those forums.
It's never been this overt. None of this stuff. The playing of politics has had to be less subtle because the lack of the subtlety, all of the subtleties have been removed or stripped down so that you have to run on a base of hatred and racism.
I would disagree that it's never been this overt. We used to hang people from trees. Okay,
I'm sorry.
We used to burn crosses on lawns.
Forgive me. I'm talking about in our lifetimes.
Yes.
The way that lawmaking is. The playing of politics is usually better concealed than this.
Yes.
The playing of politics that disguises hate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you got food for thought here. Like they're not afraid of critical race theory. They don't even know what the fuck it is. Like what they are afraid of are theories that are critical of racists. That's what they're afraid of. And you're talking about, we used to lynch people. Like, we're in modern day lynching right now. We're using guns instead of ropes. That's what happened last week in Buffalo. Like, it's a problem. And you're absolutely right. They are absolutely going to teach this great replacement bullshit in schools. That's what's going to happen.
And even if they teach it in the context of this is wrong or this was it's going to infect and poison the minds of these young and impressionable kids. This is why they have to destroy schools. This is why they have to defund public schools and destroy the quality of education being provided there so they can keep kids dumb. That's the bottom line. I mean, George Carlin talked about it 30 years ago. It's exactly what he said happened. And it was all part of Jeb Bush's long-term plan under the guise of school choice. Just like now they call it parental choice or parental. It's all bullshit. They're the best. The Republicans are the best at branding this shit. They're so good at it. The Democrats suck at it. Democrats are like, defund the police. Like, no, you fucking idiot. That's not what, that bad. It doesn't even accurately describe what your policy is. And B, it sounds totally unappealing to everyone. But the Republicans are so much better at that. The Democrats tried branding it "Don't Say Gay." It stuck. That was good. Rhymes help. Alliteration and rhymes are always good with branding. But like woke, making woke bad. Like, when did being awake become bad? I thought it was like red pill. Let's be awake. Let's be alert.
Yeah, it's better than being asleep.
Anti-fascist as opposed to pro-fascist? I mean, since when are Americans for fascism? We fought a fucking war, several of them actually, against the concept of fascism, against the concept of other Americans or other people, humans, being less than. We have inalienable rights, the Constitution says, for humans, not based on the color of our skin. I mean...
You mentioned inalienable rights. We will talk about in a second about Roe versus Wade and the leaked Supreme Court. I can't believe that we're finding ourselves in a place where 50 years in, we're revoking constitutional rights. So we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, it's the pendulum swinging. It's the pendulum swinging. We were overtly racist. There were lynchings. Matthew Shepard was lynched for being gay. But there was a moment, like you said, where politically that wasn't a platform that was appealing. The 70s into the 80s kind of changed that in a way where it was like, okay, we can't speak so overtly about our racism. And it became a kind of latent and unspoken thing. And then something happened. Barack Obama broke the brains of like half of America. Broke their brains. Seeing a black man in the White House broke their brains. And perpetuated in no small part by the former guy and this notion of birtherism, which was just dog whistle, barely concealed racism. He is other. He is not one of us. He is not American. He was not born here. He is a Muslim. Whatever they need to say to tell their people in not very concealed code that this is not American. That set us on this course where it's now okay to be this overtly hateful and racist. And the one upside of that is now we know who they are. Now we know who the fascists are, who the authoritarians are, who the demagogues are, who the racists are, and who the white supremacists and anti-Semites are. We didn't know that before, but now we know.
A tragic week in South Florida with a plane crashing on a bridge and two cyclists being killed. I don't know where to start with that other than that kind of stuff happens an awful lot around here.
Well, in Key Biscayne, which has for the last decade and a half or so has had just a burgeoning cyclist community. Every 2 or 3 years, there is another tragedy where someone on a bicycle, in this case, a couple, cycling together on a beautiful Sunday afternoon,
hit by a Jeep, and the Jeep was really damaged. Like, I can't even imagine. When I saw the Jeep, I'm like, oh my God, those people.
And apparently sober. Apparently the driver was sober. So this was all like speed and poor design of the highway. This is the thing here in this town. I mean, we have had, as you mentioned, the last week in South Florida, people die from planes, trains, and automobiles. We had a plane crash on Hallover on Collins, just north of Bal Harbor, onto an SUV with a mother and her 2 children. One, I think the co-pilot or the pilot is from the small plane is dead. We have, of course, we were talking with Whitty last week. Makes me lightens the mood a little bit.
You went straight from the pilot. You got if you're gonna lighten the mood, you have to do it a little more gracefully. And the pilot was dead, and now I'm giggle snorting because I'm thinking about Whittingham and the way he loves trains.
Whitty loves a twain. It's true. But
yes,
it warms
we did
my
talk
heart.
About trains killing people as well.
And now again, this sinister tradition. For the last 10, 15 years, every 2 or 3 years, a horrific tragedy, specifically in Key Biscayne and Virginia Key, just a couple little islands on the Rickenbacker Causeway, just off of downtown Miami and Brickell. And those are the people who died. I have a friend, Conrad, who was hit by a car within an inch, was spared within an inch of his spine was all fucked up. He had to learn to walk again. And God bless him, now he's back on the bike on Key Biscayne. I worry where you have to be worried all the time because this is what's happening. 2 years ago, a police officer hit and killed a cyclist driving through Virginia Key, which is like that's actually a pretty low speed because Rickenbacker is like a highway. But even in a low speed zone, like bicyclists are getting killed. In this town, we'll paint a bicycle on the ground on the highway and call it a bike lane.
That's the bike path.
That's insane.
It is insane.
Or we'll here's a green lane off to the side here, and that's the bike lane. But you got cars driving in the bike. You see it here on Ocean Drive. I mean, finally, I think they're putting up some of those dividers, at least make something better than those stupid floppy Lexus lane.
No, they've got now. Yes, it seems like speed bumps or something to separate. We've got Memorial Day weekend coming up in a couple of weeks. We will talk about that next week on Because Miami. But again, we want to get to this journalist who did a report on Bitcoin, on Miami Coin, and also I want to get into the leaked Supreme Court draft on a revised Roe versus Wade with Billy Corben next. I have aired, Billy, the last couple of weeks in not talking to you about something that, while it's not Because Miami or necessarily Florida, the seismic shift in something that constitutionally and politically I did not think was possible when there was a leaked opinion from the Supreme Court that would suggest that a constitutional right that has been a constitutional right for more than half a century would be repealed, would be pulled back, is not something I thought I would see in my lifetime. And it felt like a breach on a number of different levels, not the least of which is the information leaking in the first place. It feels structurally, all of this feels structurally unsound when the cry for equality from women results in now what feels like our government and our country trying to take away power from them and their own bodies.
This is none of our fucking business. This is none of my business. This is none of your business. I have absolutely no interest in being in a doctor's office with a woman having to make decisions about her family planning or her life. This doesn't have anything to do with us. Our opinion doesn't matter. And that's true of the government too. I mean, if you're going to be a small government, anti-regulation, conservative, there is nothing more fundamental about freedom and liberty than the ability to make decisions for yourself about your body that do not affect society at large. This is about individual women and their families and making decisions for their health care to get what has been a legal and safe medical procedure for generations. And the last century and almost a quarter now of American history has been about removing chains from people, giving more Americans more rights to make government less powerful and intrusive, letting women vote, letting women have body autonomy, the civil rights movement, the ability of the LGBTQ plus community to get married, adopt children, enjoy just the same rights as other Americans have, and not allow the government to intervene and illegalize their love or their ability to enter into contracts, what is marriage but a legally binding contract between consenting adults, regardless of gender.
The machine, as you cry for equality, the machine groans and pushes back.
But this is where the left and the right kind of come together in terms of being small government, so to speak. I mean, abortion polls higher than almost any elected official in the entire country.
Well, that's the part that's also crazy to me that doesn't even make sense politically, and perhaps you can explain it to me, but please continue, because I don't want to start with the politics of it before you come through with the atrocity of it, of the idea that in 2022 this would be possible.
9 people in robes that sit in lifetime appointments that were heavily influenced by politics, by special interest money, by presidents who were not even elected by a majority of voters, who won the Electoral College but lost the popular vote, are going to make a decision in which nearly 51% of Americans are going to have stripped away from them a constitutional right that they enjoyed yesterday, that they've enjoyed for 50 years of yesterdays. I don't think that's happened in our lifetime. We've seen our constitutional rights chiseled away at through bad laws, through bad judicial decisions, but we've never had a right just taken away from 51% of Americans. This is a major win on a front in a 50 years culture war of Christian nationalism and the evangelical movement. They have been fighting this. And in a way, politically, they are the dog that caught the car. Because it's like, now what? If you don't have this wedge issue, to label people baby killers, because racism used to not sell very well. You couldn't, that wasn't a good, even the groomers thing that Jerry Falwell Sr. and Anita Bryant tried here in Miami wasn't that popular of a movement. So, and they were against divorce and pornography.
You're going to need to explain to people the groomers movement before you run, because the tradition down here, a lot of this foolery begins down here. All of it, always.
So Miami, or Dade County, as it was known at the time, Metro Dade or Dade County, passed an ordinance that made it illegal to discriminate against gays and lesbians in jobs, in government. You couldn't discriminate against people because they were LGBTQ+. And Anita Bryant, a former beauty queen, the spokeswoman for Florida orange growers, comes down to Miami to repeal this equal rights ordinance. And her claim was that that because homosexuals cannot reproduce and procreate, that they have to groom and recruit new members into their dangerous cult. And so gay teachers were going to be grooming young children. It was absolute, utter homophobic insanity. And of course, they used the Bible as the shield to make these claims. Jerry Falwell Sr., very prominent televangelist at the time, came down to join this cause, this Save Our Families, Save Our Children movement, all rooted in lies and demagoguery and fear-mongering. And it was actually successful. They were able to repeal in 1980 this equal rights ordinance, this civil rights for the LGBTQ plus community here in Miami. But it wasn't a very popular issue that they could export, just like Falwell's crusade against pornography and divorce and feminism. These weren't sticky issues against the government wanting to strip churches of their tax-exempt status if they had segregation academies, or they had whites-only schools, Christian academies they called them, but they were in fact segregation academies in response to the Supreme Court's other decision in Brown versus the Board of Education, which desegregated our public schools, and the whites fled from public schools into these segregation academies that Falwell and others, so-called Christians, had opened. And so the government's like, well, you can't be a tax-exempt religious organization or not-for-profit school and also be segregationist. So we're going to strip you of that stuff. Yeah.
You watch us.
But that also wasn't a winning political issue. So they needed to find a wedge issue. And here's something interesting. Roe v. Wade was decided, and the evangelicals didn't give a shit. They didn't care. The Catholics cared. It was a Catholic issue. The evangelicals actually were for small government. Many of them believed that it's none of our business. And it's not the Bible's business or God's business to intervene.
Most Americans believe it's none of our business. Now, what is it? Did you say 70%?
Upwards of 70% in some states, yeah.
So right now, the courts have ruled on something in the favor of what would be met with a 70% disapproval rating.
They haven't ruled yet. This was a leaked draft decision.
Forgive me. The plan to rule that way.
Yeah, and we'll know by the end of this Supreme Court session at the end of June what the actual decision, how it reads, and so it's weird to sort of comment on the content of something that hasn't been formally published and voted upon once and for all. But I will say there's no doubt that this is what's going to happen. That the ultimate outcome is an overturning of Roe v. Wade. This has been the plan. This was the mix between plot and plan, but this was the plot. All along, like I said, going back 50 years.
And flan.
Yes,
so it became plan.
I'm very hungry, Dan.
Yes, it became plan, and this was the plan.
So it was a Freudian slip. But this is going to happen, and because this was their plan all along, this is why they wanted someone like Trump in office who was not going to nominate qualified judges. In fact, many of his judges were deemed unqualified to lifetime positions in the federal judiciary. They just wanted a guy who was going to do whatever he needed to do to be loved by this base because he was abandoned by everybody else in this country.
Moving from that, you wanted me to hear some Ileana Garcia sound. What is it that the audience and I need to know before we play this sound?
Well, what you said is that you're not sure that this has to do with because Miami or because Florida. It very much does, because the Florida legislature passed one of these so-called trigger laws. There's 22 or 23 states across the country that the second Roe v. Wade is overturned. These laws are instantly going to be constitutional and go into effect without any legitimate legal remedy. And one of those was passed in Florida this year, which is the 15-week abortion ban. More treacherously is that it was passed without an exemption for rape, incest, or human trafficking. There's no exemption. It's a blanket 15-week abortion ban. Women do not have the option.
If you get raped, you must have the rapist's baby. That and the other element of this also, we've seen some of this make appearances, right? And you can get to the point where that man can sue you for not having his baby.
Or you may wind up, depending on how the law changes and in the face of the unbridled insanity that an overturning of Roe v. Wade will unleash, maybe women will go to jail for it. Maybe their doctors will be in prison for it. Maybe they'll be charged with crimes. Maybe they'll get the death penalty, Dan, because we're so pro-life in this country. Or should I say anti-choice. And what we are pro is Christian white male supremacy over races, religions, and most importantly, for whatever reason, women's bodies. The subjugation of women is such an important part of the toxicity of this Christian nationalism and this theocracy that is taking over the country. And you have something like 70% of the senators in this country will be elected by 30% of the population. So you have this disproportionate amount of power concentrated in the tiny majority of this country, and you have minority rule. And what you have here in Miami is a state senator in Ileana Garcia. She was a part-time TV and radio personality turned founder of Latinas for Trump, which is kind of like Jews for Hitler. And then she became a spokeswoman for the Department of Homeland Security. It was this classic Miami failing up thanks to sycophantry of dear leader. You know, like anybody who said anything nice about Trump got an appointment to,
weird Miami power brokering. Just say nice things about Trump, you will climb up the ladder.
Now, here's the thing. She was elected, Dan. We've talked about this on Because Miami before. She was elected by about 34 or 32 votes in a race in which a Republican operative, who's now been arrested for it, placed a ghost candidate, financed a shill candidate who had the same surname, Rodriguez. His name was Alex Rodriguez, and he was running against Jose Javier Rodriguez and then Ileana Garcia, a woman with no experience and no qualifications other than the founder of Latinas for Trump to be a state senator. So this Alex Rodriguez, who no one's ever heard of, who did zero campaigning except for some campaign flyers calling him a liberal,
who may not have existed.
He did exist. He was arrested and charged too. But he siphoned away about over 6,000 votes from Jose Javier Rodriguez, creating confusion in the marketplace based on the surname, if you will. And Ileana Garcia was elected by just over 30 votes. So this is a state senator as the result of a stolen election, legitimate election fraud, mind you, for which two people have been charged. One is pled not guilty. One is pled guilty. And she has a reaction. So there's a weekly, what they call the Miami Beach Tuesday Breakfast Club that former Miami Beach Mayor Matty Bauer hosts on Alton Road. And they get together for breakfast. And they have a politician come and speak. And so Ileana Garcia came and spoke, which is more than I can say for most of the politicians that won't come on this show. But she came to Miami Beach, which is kind of a bastion of Democrats and liberalism, because with her redrawn district that she's running in, it now goes all the way up to 41st Street. So she has to answer to these folks, and it carves out a little bit of the South. So she came north, and she gets confronted with her vote in favor of the 15-week abortion ban without an exemption for rape, incest, or human trafficking.
Why can't we have exceptions when it comes to abortion in terms of people get trafficked, who get raped, and incest? That's all I want. I appreciate that. So I work at the Department of Homeland Security, and I had the opportunity to go out to the border, and I've worked a lot in human trafficking stuff. So human traffickers, as long as their commodity, which is the girls or the women, are not pregnant, they continue to use them. So what we would like, as a matter of fact, we would like to see in the future is more of these entities like Planned Parenthood reporting these human traffickers, because it's a copy, paste, repeat. When the girl or the woman gets pregnant and they can't make her get an abortion, or she doesn't want to get an abortion, or they can't get her to a place to get an abortion, they don't use her anymore. So they released her from the human trafficking ring. That is why we went to that point. Now, with regards to incest and rape, it's up to 15 weeks to make a decision. And I kid you not, it is a tough spot. I would ask you, if you can, look up children of rape. And like I said, in going through the process to make my decision, and obviously my filter, I am a conservative Republican. I am a very pro-life Republican. I sat down to listen to a lot of the testimonies of children that were either victims of, or the mother that had to make the decision of either getting an abortion or keeping it. And you'd be surprised. A good 40% of women decide to keep it, and they don't regret it.
Okay, gibberish.
I mean, worse than gibberish, because she gets to vote on this, and it's worse than gibberish. She said that she voted for a 15-week abortion ban that does not, without an exemption for rape, incest, or human trafficking, to help victims of human trafficking. Because if they get knocked up, then they won't be useful to their traffickers anymore. And also that, like, almost 40% of women don't regret not having an abortion. Let's forget the 60%, even if her stat is true. But also talk to children born of, I don't know what. That's why I couldn't characterize it, because like you just have to listen to the insanity to understand.
But it's no, when I say gibberish, it's meant to be a whole bunch of nothing that doesn't answer anything, that doesn't have to do with anything, that is noise over here, word salad over here, and doesn't have much of anything to do with a woman's body or abortion as part of a power grab that that has very little to do with this issue. If 30% of Americans are in favor of this, you're making, I don't even know how it is that you make this argument. Like, it's, who's making this argument? Well, other than the religious.
You're right. It's not an argument, and they're not even making an argument because, again, Jerry Falwell Sr. did not make his first sermon against abortion until 5 years after Roe v. Wade. Why? Because they were beta testing these other manipulations, and they weren't working. They weren't mobilizing for they weren't mobilizing voters for political power, and they were not generating donations to the church. And so they came up with this brand of baby killers and used that to manipulate their flock. But here's the thing it's important about Ileana Garcia specifically. I mean, it reminds me of, she's not making an argument. The defense mechanism of an octopus when threatened by a predator, or in this case, an elected threatened by a good question from a constituent, is to emit a dye into the water and squirm away as fast as possible while the predator is disoriented. And you're right, that's what this is. This reminds me of, this is like Dave Chappelle when he gets asked and he knocks the shit over and then he and he runs away, that's exactly what, a lot of noise and I worked at Homeland Security. She was a spokesperson, but also this is a person who told Jim DeFeeti on CBS Miami that there is no racism in America anymore because Barack Obama was elected, and that black people should just move on and get over it. And that gay, this is a quote, gay is not a permanent thing. LGBT is not a permanent thing. This is the mind of Ileana Garcia, but she's not alone. This is the mind of a lot of people who are just absolutely unqualified to discuss, debate, or decide any public policy whatsoever, and yet there they are in the Florida State Senate.
Last thoughts before we get out of here, because I did want to make sure that you had to say, that you said everything that you wanted to say on something that is or has become a political hour, and we did not talk enough about not just the local element of this. Ileana Garcia is one part of it, but just how appalling it is, what is clearly has been foretold, what is clearly coming, and the horrors it's about to unleash.
I want to see more Americans in this country have more freedom. I want the power to the people, not to the government. The government has a very meaningful place in our society, and it should be to help people. It should be to make infrastructure. It should be for national defense. It should be to ensure that we have a fair and even playing ground when it comes to democracy, when it comes to free and fair elections, when it comes to capitalism. So there needs to be government intervention and regulations and public housing and we need Social Security, we need Medicaid and Medicare. This is not to denounce the government. This is to say, where does the government belong? And I think that's a conversation that a lot of Americans can come to the table on and come to agreement on. And I think most people would agree. In fact, like I said, it polls upwards of 70%, that in your doctor's office and in your body and inside a woman's reproductive organs are not the place for government.
As he writes about the internet, he writes about emerging tech, and he is here to echo your many complaints and criticisms and tell us that Miami coin is indeed garbage.
I don't think he's here to echo anything. I mean, we've been following the Miami coin story since its inception of the coin last summer. We've been covering it here since last fall.
You've been laughing at this since the moment you kept asking, "Where's the money? What is this? Why is the mayor?" You were asking journalistic questions because you're like, why is the mayor hidden on this? Why is he not revealing to people who he's in business with? Why is he using his platform to secure, Bitcoin money and all sorts of things that he's filing under helping the city when it doesn't appear that that's what it is?
And this week, Scott Nover, who is a journalist, concluded and published a months-long investigation into Miami coin with the title, Miami's Mayor Backed Miami coin crypto. Then its price dropped 95%. Scott, thank you for being here. I know why it was on my radar because I'm a Miamian and I'm constantly looking for it finds me, government malfeasance and corruption and fuckery. And you are, I guess you're New York based. There is a New York coin by way of City Coins. So how did you get turned on to this story, to Miami coin?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm actually based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but so I really have no connection to it at all. But yeah, so I mean, I cover tech and I cover crypto from time to time, and my colleague and I were attracted to this story because it's still a little bit different than most cryptocurrency stories. There's a real public official involved with this, a mayor who's kind of putting a lot of his political capital on the line. And intertwining a city's finances. And I thought it would be a good story and something worth looking into. I knew they were expanding in New York and Austin and trying to make an example out of Miami for the better. And I also knew that Florida's got some pretty good public records laws and would be able to dig up a little bit of Florida, emails.
Billy is someone who does journalism and has public records access, makes the requests, and puts pressures on officials. What did you discover?
Yeah. So I discovered that there were, first I discovered that there's a very close relationship between Suarez's team and this other entity called City Coins, which is basically the company that runs and started Miami coin. And it seemed like a lot of close coordination and strategy. And, it kind of made the mayor's statements that he's not, in charge of this thing seem a little suspect, or, at least, it's not something that he's so distant from. Then the second thing I found is one email that I thought was particularly interesting from a spokesperson for City Coins, saying to the mayor's chief of staff, hey, we actually need an hour of media training with the mayor because in recent interviews with the press, he's tripped over some regulatory wires and we're concerned about the longevity of this project. And I thought that was pretty interesting because I want to know what those regulatory wires are that they tripped, whether that media training session ever happened. It doesn't appear that it did. And why some, spokesperson for a private company is telling the mayor what to do. So that was, I thought, the most revealing kind of thing that came out of this first batch of emails.
Billy, the reason I pointed out that you do an attempt to do journalism is because you're not classically journalistically trained. This person, I'm assuming, the people listening who aren't making distinctions about how investigative reporting like this is done, is doing thoroughly vetted things meant to gather facts through using public records and information laws. What did you find interesting about the article as a reader who wanted to have Scott on with us?
Well, first and foremost, back in 2016, the SEC referred to the city of Miami as a recidivist violator of the federal securities laws. That was true back then. That is true moving forward. Scott interviewed a guy by the name of John Reed Stark, a former chief of the SEC's Office of Internet Enforcement, who had some really compelling quotes in the article. And then when the article was published on Monday, didn't just double down, but kind of like, I would say, escalated his remarks. In the story, he said that this email itself from this publicist kind of spokesperson character from last October that Scott just paraphrased, he said that alone is a red flag for regulators searching for potential wrongdoing. Quote, the SEC could very easily see an email like this, become concerned, open up a formal investigation, and issue subpoenas to everyone as to what's going on. But then, I don't know when you did that interview, but fast forward to the publication of the article this week, and John Reed Stark tweeted, I worked in the SEC enforcement division for 18 plus years, and to me, the Miami coin debacle is a cesspool of suspicious conduct and chicanery. SEC enforcement staff should get a formal order and issue subpoenas forthwith. First, I thought I had found my own burner account. Then I realized this was, in fact, John Reed Stark, formerly of the SEC. And this is pretty alarming. The notion that perhaps, because here's what happened. You had a mayor out there, and this was my interest in it. We talked about this with Patrick Stanley when he was on the show, one of the co-founders, or he doesn't call himself that. He's a community whatever leader or liaison for City Coins. But we talked about this. My interest in this is that there is this public official, this elected official, who seems to be exploiting, if not abusing, his office by promoting and shilling this unregistered security
with business ties that haven't been transparent either.
I believe that that's the case as well. And you know, it leads me to wonder, Scott, because here's a sentence from his article. I love this article. Miami Coin makes money for the city government based on its value among investors who mine and trade it on the crypto market. Anyone can theoretically purchase Miami Coin on an exchange or mine new tokens by paying to enter a digital lottery in which new tokens are issued. If that last sentence doesn't throw every red flag in the world up for you, then you need your entire finances covered by a conservatorship like Britney had, because you're just completely reckless. The money isn't in the value of the coin, it's in the promotion of the product. The city basically runs a Miami Coin boiler room, and that's how Francis Suarez sees the city, as his own personal boiler room to promote himself and the various schemes of his private clients.
You are on the record with all of this stuff. Scott, do you agree, or does your reporting support what Billy is saying? Is this all a giant con? You can't just call it that. That's the easy thing to do at a microphone. You have to be more responsible than that. But how fishy is what it is that you're reporting?
Yeah, I don't know of any sort of wrongdoing by Suarez. All I know is that this is he is promoting, if not officially endorsing, a product that is a failure and has no real use. And I think that it warrants really good questions. Certainly, if the SEC did, follow Stark's, line of logic and issue subpoenas, they could find whatever they want to find. I don't know what Suarez is doing. It has made some money for the city of Miami, but at what cost, I think, is the question.
Well, what is the question? What is the answer to that question?
The cost is that if you're investing in any sort of asset that drops 95%, whether you're a Miami resident or not, you're losing your shirt. The city of Miami would be profiting off of this activity that is, not only useless but actively damaging to investors. And unregulated. We talk about the SEC, but these are not regulated products. There's no securities fraud if it's not there's no penalty for people lying about cryptocurrencies, because until they're categorized as a security, they don't fall under the.
But
the
Billy,
traditional
it's your
regulatory
theory
framework.
that this, the most corrupt mayor in the history of Miami, the most corrupt of cities. It is your theory that this is all a Ponzi scheme. That whatever Miami gets in money or whatever it gets in value is at the expense of bankrupting investors that are at the bottom end of a chain.
Well, there's no doubt about that. The people who have invested money in this, whose 30% of that money has gone to the city of Miami by way of this donation, a crypto wallet that incidentally has lost 50% of its value at this point, but they have cashed out to the tune of about $5 million because you convert the Miami coin into stacks, into Bitcoin, it's a very convoluted kind of a car wash of a series of transactions that presumably someone's getting paid along that way. But that money they could take money from ecstasy dealers if they wanted to take money. Doesn't just because there's money is not proof of concept, particularly in light of the fact that what these people have bought and invested in has lost 95% of its value. But let me ask you this, Scott, based on your reporting, you just mentioned that there's, New York coin is going to be a thing. Philly took a pass on this to their credit after doing their due diligence, which Miami's not famous for its due diligence, by the way. We'll sort of embrace any great Gatsby-esque kind of scheme that comes or person that comes our way. And you said Austin is looking into this. My question is, are there any other mayors, Eric Adams, are there any other mayors who are out front and center who are the mascot for this thing like Francis Suarez is?
No. I think that if you asked me that question in the early fall of last year, I would have said maybe Eric Adams. Adams, when he was running, was talking about crypto everything and being this crypto mayor, and in a very similar fashion to Suarez, kind of banking on being seen as an innovator en route to political office. But once he got elected, he stopped talking about New York City coin and this project, and he hasn't mentioned it since taking office in January. So New York City coin is live. It launched, last year, and it's done just as poorly as Miami coin, but there's no kind of official appearance that it's in any way endorsed by Adams, unless you were trading based on his statements in the fall, which is also a reasonable thing to do. I don't know the status with Austin, but it seems like they are still planning to launch that. Philly did reject it. I'm sure there's other municipal governments that have considered it.
There's an amazing quote in the story here because it is a purely speculative asset. It is not a legitimate currency. It has no utility. You can't use it to pay your bills. You can't use it to pay fines or anything in the city of Miami or the city of New York, for that matter, or Austin. There's a really interesting quote from a Brookings Institution fellow who draws a straight line between the endorsement of risky, unregulated assets like cryptocurrencies and financial products like payday loans and subprime mortgages. She sees it as part of the legacy of predatory inclusion, offering low-income people access to the financial system, but on risky, exploitative terms that may burn vulnerable individuals. Cryptocurrencies are volatile, they're risky, complex, and the space is ripe with scams, frauds, and hacks. Is that what we're seeing, or were there victims here who have lost their shirts, or in some cases their cars, I hear on the Discord for City Coins in this?
It seems so. We didn't do a ton of man on the street interviews for this piece, but please reach out to me if you've been burned, personally by Miami coin. But yeah, I think that's the concern is it's not hard to imagine people thinking that this is more legitimate than Bitcoin or Ethereum or, many of the mainstream cryptocurrencies. You can think about them what you want, but you could imagine someone says, I don't really feel like investing in those, but this one's endorsed by the mayor. This one is Miami branded. He's talking about it, he's promoting it. It sounds like a safe store of value. And it's not, and I see what, I think what Ms. Carmona said in that interview was really poignant. Crypto appears to give people a chance to, make a lot of money and, better themselves financially. And no doubt some people have done that through cryptocurrencies, but I can't imagine anyone did it through Miami coin.
The great thing about being a documentary filmmaker is I get to do a lot of synthesis journalism. I get to come in later after the fact and kind of, piggyback on the work that you have already done. But interestingly here this year...
Thief and grifter is what I like to call you.
It's remix culture. It's remix culture.
A buzzard who comes in And but can you tell us how rare, before you get to your question, how rare it is to lose that much value that quickly on anything that would be government supported on this? Because so that people understand how bogus this was, that's a precipitous fall, even by the standards that Billy was applying, which is to howl that this was coming from the very beginning.
I think the problem with crypto is that it's not so unbelievably rare that you would have an investment go to zero. Obviously, these things can happen in penny stocks and, a lot of bad investments, or worse than going to zero. But with crypto, you hear all the time about rug pulls and Ponzi's and scams and people thinking that they're investing in one thing and it has no value, or it's very hard to determine why a given cryptocurrency would go up or down in value. It's mostly about hype. These are not businesses with financial disclosures that you can read, like Facebook or Twitter. We don't know even who's running half of these things. At least here we know about, Stanley and to an extent his team, but these are not businesses with publicly traded disclosures and which is not a lot, but basic kind of disclosures about who's running them and what their business is and how it's doing.
Right. So the $5 million that CitiCoins turned over to the city of Miami is effectively a marketing budget, right? Because they're basically paying the mayor and the city for having promoted this thing. Because I've never seen commercials for it or anything like that, right? That's a write-off. It's a marketing expense.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's fundraising at the end of the day. I think that the question is, why would you need a cryptocurrency to do fundraising? I'm sure that there's a way to raise $5.25 million, or if you throw in the other $6 million that's in the wallet, $11 million to finance, a good cause of helping people have been affected by rent increases, which is what they're using it for, which is what the city council decided on, I think. But yeah, it's unclear why you would need to have investors lose money on an unregulated financial product in order to raise $11 million.
And I think on this show, you could argue that we have actually discovered a utility for CitiCoins, because an entire cottage industry has developed to warn people about it. That seems to be its sole utility.
Scott, thank you for being on with us. Billy rarely gets these kinds of victory laps where he gets to celebrate.
It's not a victory. People are losing their money.
That's right, but you're winning an argument.
Oh, all right.
You get to be right.
I'm sorry to give you that.
It's one of Billy's favorite things. Thank you for being on with us, Scott. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have me back anytime.
Just want to close out with a Flashback Friday, going all the way back to checks notes last month, when imaginary coin salesman and Miami Mayor Ponzi Postalita Francis Suarez gave an MLM pitch at the Bitcoin 2022 conference that would make Nevin Shapiro blush. I think that he thinks the fiat currency is a car. Test drive the new fiat currency at your local dealer.
The second thing that we need to do this year is we need to integrate Bitcoin into every aspect of our society, every part of the fabric of our society. We need to make sure that you can go into a convenience store and buy a Snickers with a Satoshi. And the last thing that we need to do is we need to unleash the macro power of Bitcoin. Bitcoin has the power to democratize and to create wealth for the unbanked and for the poor in our community who are getting decimated by inflation and government spending that has gone rampant. If you have a bank account today, guess how much interest you're earning? Zero. And it's worse than that. It's worse than that because of inflation. Someone is sticking a hand in your bank account and taking money out because the purchasing power of your fiat currency, the fiat currency of the world, is being diminished. And so we have to lean into this generational wealth creation opportunity so that the poor in our community don't get left behind like they always do when government intervenes. We have to understand that Bitcoin has the possibility of being able to allow for people to transmit money outside of the banking system efficiently and quickly and give people in countries that are dominated by, in many cases, socialist and communist regimes, the ability to untether themselves from that control and be able to be free and be able to spend money in their countries and buy goods without having to worry that the currency that they're using is being controlled by the very government that controls all of their decisions.
We'll do Because Miami again next week. Cocaine's.